You counted backwards from 10. You got to 7, maybe 6, and then nothing. Not darkness, not a dream, not a long black wait in a room somewhere. The next thing you know, a nurse is saying your name, the clock has jumped 4 hours, and a surgeon has already been inside your body and closed you back up. And the strangest part isn't the missing time. It's that the missing time didn't feel like time at all. It didn't feel like anything. So here's the question almost nobody answers you honestly. For those 4 hours, where were you? We have a comfortable word for what happened. We say you were put to sleep. It's a kind word, and it's meant to be. But it is also the single most misleading thing anyone will ever tell you about your own body. Because whatever happened to you on that table, it was not sleep. And the difference between the two is the whole story. Sleep is a place you can be pulled out of. Right now, asleep, you are still there. A loud enough sound, a hand on your shoulder, your own name spoken twice, and you surface. Your brain is running the entire night, cycling through stages, replaying your day, throwing dreams up onto the inside of your skull. Sleep is something your brain actively does to you. You are never gone. You're just busy somewhere you can't remember. General anesthesia is not that. Under anesthesia, there is no sound loud enough, no shoulder to shake. You cannot be woken, no matter what happens, until the drug itself begins to leave your body. That is not a deeper version of sleep. That is a different category of thing entirely. And once you see why, you can't unsee it. To feel the size of that difference, go back to before we had it. In 1811, a novelist named Frances Burney had a breast tumor removed in Paris. Fully awake, held down, a wine cordial her only mercy. She lived, and months later, she wrote her sister a letter describing every second of it, because she could not stop remembering. Surgery for all of human history meant this. Speed was the only kindness, because the patient felt all of it. Then, on the morning of October 16, 1846, in a surgical theater at Massachusetts General Hospital, a room we still call the Ether Dome, a dentist named William Morton held a glass inhaler to the face of a printer named Edward Abbott. Abbott breathed ether. The surgeon cut a tumor from his neck, and Abbott did not scream, did not fight, did not remember. When it was over, the surgeon turned to the stunned room and said, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." Something had happened that had never reliably happened before in the history of our species. Not that the pain was dulled, that the person it would have happened to was, for a while, simply not there to receive it. We had found the off switch. And here is the humbling part. We found it almost 80 years before we had any idea what it was switching off. So, what do the drugs actually touch? Start with propofol, the milky white liquid behind most modern anesthesia, the one that likely carried you under. It's easy to imagine it as a powerful calming agent, something that soothes an anxious brain into stillness. That picture is wrong, and the real one is far stranger. Propofol works mainly on a receptor called GABA-A. Think of it as the brain's brake pedal. Every neuron is a switch that can turn its neighbors on or off, and GABA is the main off signal. Propofol jams that brake down. It doesn't calm your neurons, it floods them with silence, forcing whole populations of them to stop firing. But, and this is where it stops being about drowsiness, quieting neurons isn't really the point. The point is what that silence does to the conversation between them. Your consciousness, as far as we can tell, isn't produced by any one region lighting up. It's produced by regions talking to each other. And there is one structure at the center of that conversation, the thalamus. Picture the thalamus as a switchboard sitting deep in the middle of your brain, roughly the size of 2 walnuts. Almost every signal, what you see, hear, feel, routes through it on the way to the cortex, the wrinkled outer sheet where perception and thought get assembled. The thalamus and the cortex talk constantly, in loops, thousands of times a second. That endless back and forth is a lot of what being awake physically is. Anesthesia cuts the lines. It doesn't destroy the thalamus or the cortex. Both are perfectly intact, perfectly alive. It interrupts the traffic between them and between the far-flung regions of the cortex itself. The eye can still register light, the ear can still receive sound, but the parts can no longer assemble those signals into a single, unified scene, with someone at the center of it, experiencing the scene. The chorus is still full of singers, they've just stopped being able to hear each other. This turned out to be one of the most important discoveries in the science of the mind, and not because of surgery, because of the hardest question we have. The question is old and stubborn. How does 3 pounds of electrified tissue produce an inner experience at all? Why is there something it is like to be you rather than nothing at all? Philosophers call it the hard problem, and for most of history it was untouchable, because you could never catch consciousness in the act of switching on or off. Every person you could study was already stubbornly a person. Anesthesia changed that. For the first time, we had a dial. We could take a conscious human being and, over the course of a minute, turn the person down to nothing and back up again, and watch it happen on a monitor. Consciousness became something you could put on a graph. And here's what the graph shows. Awake, if you send a small pulse of magnetic stimulation into the cortex, the response ripples outward, complex, spreading, echoing across regions, one area answering another. It's the signature of a system whose parts are integrated, all in conversation. Now give the same pulse under anesthesia. The response is short, local, dead simple. The pulse hits one spot and fizzles. The echo doesn't spread because there's nothing left to spread through. Researchers turn that into an actual number, a measure of how complex and integrated the brain's response is. High, and someone is home. Low, and no one is. You can, quite literally, watch the value fall as the person disappears and climb as they return. The lights are still on in every room of the house. There's just no longer anyone walking between the rooms. Now, here is where an honest guide has to slow down, because this is the part the comfortable version skips. We say, no one is home. We infer it. The integration collapses, the number drops, the person doesn't respond, and afterward they remember nothing. But absence of a report is not the same as absence of an experience. And we know this because rarely the inference is wrong. There is a phenomenon called accidental awareness under general anesthesia. In a small fraction of operations, a patient surfaces, partly, briefly, while the surgery is underway. Most such moments are dim and fleeting. But in the rarest and most frightening version, a person can be conscious and unable to move at all, because modern anesthesia often pairs the drug that removes your mind with a separate drug that paralyzes your muscles, awake, aware, and with no way to signal it. The largest study ever done on this, a national audit, across every public hospital in Britain and Ireland, called NAP5, put the reported rate at something like 1 in 19,000, reassuringly rare. But that number counts the people who remembered and told someone. And that points at the thing that should unsettle us more than it does. Our monitors don't measure experience. They measure correlates of it, brain rhythms, drug levels, the odds. We read the dials and we conclude no one is suffering. Usually we're right. But we are inferring an absence we cannot yet directly see. We cannot open a window into another mind and confirm the room is empty. We can only note that the lights read low. Sit with that, because it sharpens the real question. If we can't fully prove there was no experience, then when you went under, what actually happened to the you that would have had one? So, where did you go? Here is the answer the science keeps circling back to, and it's stranger than any dream you could have had. You didn't go anywhere, because there was no you sitting somewhere, intact, waiting out the surgery in a dark room. There was no you tucked away, no you asleep in the back, no you traveling and returning. The thing you call you, the felt sense of being a single someone here, now, looking out, is not an object that persists inside your head like a coin in a jar. It's something your brain is continuously doing. It's a process, a performance that has to be actively generated, moment to moment, by all those regions talking to each other. It is less like a statue in a room and more like a piece of music, real, unmistakable, powerful, and existing only while it's being played. Anesthesia stops the playing. It doesn't hide the music away somewhere. It doesn't muffle it. It halts the process that was generating it. And when the process halts, there is no leftover self to be located because the self was the process. The gap in your memory isn't a stretch of time you spent somewhere you can't recall. It's the interval during which the person who would have experienced time was briefly not being made. That's why it didn't feel like anything. Not because you forgot the feeling, because for those hours there was no one there for it to feel like something too. The missing time isn't lost. It's the clean, seamless mark of your own absence, the one experience you will never be able to remember, because the whole point of it is that there was no you to do the remembering. And then, the drug thins out, the brake lifts, the thalamus and the cortex find each other again, the regions start talking, the loops close, the integration climbs, and the music starts back up mid-phrase as if it had never stopped. The self reassembles so smoothly that you don't even notice you were ever gone. You just feel like no time passed, which, for the person you are, is exactly true. Tonight, you'll do the ordinary miracle instead. You'll fall asleep and stay assembled, still there, still generating a self, dreaming, replaying, reachable. Someone could say your name and pull you back. All night, the music keeps playing, quietly, to an audience of one that never leaves. Anesthesia is the only experience that shows you the other thing you're capable of. Not sleeping, but stopping. Not resting, but pausing the very process that is you, and having it resume so perfectly that you'd swear nothing ever interrupted it. You spend your whole life assuming you're a thing that exists. A solid, continuous someone here without effort. But once, on a table counting backwards somewhere past 7, your brain quietly showed you the truth it usually hides. You are not a thing that is kept. You are a thing that is done. And the most astonishing fact about you is not that it can be switched off. It's that every single morning, without anyone deciding to, it switches itself back on and hands you back to yourself like nothing ever happened.